In this week's episode of The 100, we have some treachery afoot, a great escape, and a much better look at the mysterious anomaly. First, let's talk about Octavia, Diyoza, and Xavier's trek towards the anomaly. Xavier leads them to a sort of outpost with a lot of radio receivers and plenty of connections to Gabriel. Octavia's arm is still all oldified, and the time dilation is rapidly making its way to her head. They need to get to the anomaly quick. Xavier tells them that on the way there, they will experience effects similar to what the red sun causes, and that he won't take them there if they bring any weapons.
You know what happens during the red sun?
Heard about it. Tree toxins, mass hysteria. Sounds like a party.
It's not. The anomaly has a similar effect on the plants here. Only it's constant and weirder. Trust me. You do not want to be armed.
But before they set out, Octavia has a bit of an episode, and while Xavier is tending to her, Diyoza notices a scar on the back of his neck.
You look pretty good for an old man. Say hi to Gabriel.
She puts everything together, and it's revealed that Xavier is in fact Gabriel. In retrospect, it was pretty obvious, and I'm sure plenty of people on the internet had that figured out already, but it's an interesting twist nonetheless. Gabriel points out that things haven't really changed, and that they still need him to fix Octavia's arm, so they head out towards the anomaly. On the way, Gabriel begins to hallucinate about Josephine. He explains to the others that hallucinations can be either your greatest fears or your greatest desires. Meanwhile, Octavia sees an image of Bellamy tied up and gagged. One quick aside, I feel like there's more meaning in this vision to Octavia than we'll see in this episode, but I'll just leave it at that for now. While all of this is happening, Gabriel explains how it was that he ended up in this body given his moral opposition to the whole Prime procedure.
I eventually taught someone, Eduardo. A null infant rescued from the offering grove. I loved him like a son. Unfortunately, once he learned to perform the procedure, he refused.
Why?
By then, Xavier was born. He had the blood. Eduardo believed it was a sign, a freeborn host. I thought I convinced him otherwise, but when my last body died, he finally wiped Xavier and brought me back.
Upon hearing this, in a fit of rage, Gabriel killed him, and rather than reveal to the other children of Gabriel what happened and be labeled a hypocrite, he took the identity of Xavier and continued his work from there. We'll just ignore the fact that he probably had both the technology and the capability to destroy his mind drive rather than just leave it in, I guess. Seems like something he probably should have done right off the bat, but whatever. In the final scene of this episode involving the trio, Diyoza begins to see a vision of her unborn daughter, Hope, as a child. Hope leads Diyoza into the anomaly, and Octavia follows her. Almost immediately after that, Octavia comes running back out of the anomaly and into Gabriel. Her arm has been healed, but there is no sign of Diyoza. My mind reels about all the potential directions this could go in for the overall story. Time travel is always a tricky thing to write, but we've seen some crazy plots in this show before that have worked to great effect. So I'm not even going to speculate on what will happen with this, and just let it play out. Back at the village, the gang is trying to come up with a way to save Clarke. Bellamy is trying to think up a way with minimal bloodshed, but Maddie has another idea. She wants to kill one of the primes, which will then cause the others to head into the castle where they will have an ambush set up to take the rest out. Bellamy asks if it's her saying this or Shadehetta, a thought Maddie quickly dismisses. Her effort to flex her muscle as the commander probably won't work on this crowd, but it's only a matter of time until she takes things into her own hands. Meanwhile, Josephine is coming up with a plan to remove Clarke from her head for good. She's recruited Murphy to help her with the promise of immortality, but now he has to convince Emori to get on board with that. He gets down on one knee and proposes to her with the promise to spend the rest of eternity together.
What are those?
Mind drives. One for each of us.
First they make us Nightbloods, then they make us Primes.
We'll never die.
Oh no, that's a survivor's move.
Oh, the ultimate.
Emori contemplates what this means, and before she can make a decision, Josephine interrupts them.
Adorable. Sorry to interrupt.
She calls on them and Riker to help build an EMP to remove Clarke from her brain, a fact that none of them knew about previously. Emori reluctantly agrees to help and says she needs to get apart from Bellamy. Bellamy gives up the shock collar from the ship, but before she leaves, she tells the gang that Clarke is still alive, something they already knew. She tells them that Josephine is planning to do this right now and they have to stop her. So Bellamy's not so well thought out plan is put into action, but not before they notice Maddie is missing. The scene switches to Maddie killing Miranda, a prime she mentioned as her target in her much more murdery plan. They put the final touches on the EMP and Josephine reveals why Riker is helping them.
Jade has a letter from my father about how you let Gabriel go. That makes you a founder of the terrorists trying to wipe us out. My guess, you'll get fed to them for it.
She then turns to Murphy and Emori to ensure that they won't just kill her when she's unconscious, but Emori has managed to sneak off with the EMP. She makes it to the radiation fence, but Josephine and Murphy catch up. Josephine tries to convince her to give up the machine, and just then Bellamy and Echo come up behind them. Josephine does her best to try and play all the cards in her hand, but Bellamy has a counter to every one. So in desperation, Josephine grabs Murphy and holds a scalpel to his throat.
Either you let Murphy die in a doomed attempt to save her, starting a war with my father, or we stay friends and live happily ever after. Take a minute to think it over.
Bellamy calls her bluff and goes to work on bringing the fence down to escape. Josephine cuts Murphy's leg and goes after Emori, but Echo easily disarms and neutralizes her. They take down the barrier and Bellamy drags a handcuffed Josephine out into the woods. While this is happening, Emori says yes to Murphy's proposal and agrees to a life of immortality with him.
I have to go.
John. My answer's yes. I will love you forever, even if we die today.
To finish things off, there was a small side story about how Abby is working to bring Kane back. Raven realizes what is happening and voices her concerns about the ethics behind all this. Gavin, the host selected to hold Kane's mind, tries to assuage Raven's concerns, but that doesn't really help, and Simone just ends up killing Gavin. This means that if they don't do the procedure, Gavin died for nothing. I have a feeling this one wasn't in the ethics textbook.
So much for first do no harm.
Later on, Abby tries to justify her actions to Raven, but she's having none of that. The kicker is that Abby needs Raven to do a spacewalk in order to create the Nightblood serum, so without her, the whole thing becomes a lot more complicated. With Abby failing to convince Raven, she says she'll just do the spacewalk herself. But just as she's about to go out, Raven comes by to stop her. She knows Abby would just die out there, so rather than even more lives being wasted in this endeavor, Raven agrees to do the spacewalk.
The way I see it, letting you die too would only make things worse. I couldn't save my mother, but I can save you.
In the final scene of the show, Kane wakes in his new body, and while we don't get a whole lot of his reaction, it's pretty clear that he doesn't exactly seem pleased about it. Well, that's all for this week. Tune in next week for more recaps and analysis of the latest episodes of The 100.